Thank you for joining today's webinar, The 7 Vaults of TCO. This session will be recorded and you will receive a link via email to play back the recording. All phones will be muted during the webinar and we will unmute the lines at the end of the presentations for questions. So again, thank you for joining us today. Here's our agenda for the webinar today. I'm going to walk through Evolve IP and give you some background on the company as well as myself. My name is Joseph Pedeno. I'm Senior Vice President of Cloud Engineering for Evolve IP. We're going to walk through the projected path TCO as well as talking through the evaluation process. And then I'm going to give you some keys to unlocking the 7 vaults of IT expenses to help you look at a lot of the individual decision components that help make a decision and provide you with a path forward. And then obviously using the projected path calculator, we'll have some real world examples at the end. So who is Evolve IP? We are the nation's only single source cloud services provider, and we've been built from the beginning to provide organizations with a unified option for cloud services. We enable businesses to migrate all or select portion of their IT technologies to our award-winning virtual private cloud. So whether it's hosted PBX, unified call centers, compute, as well as data and colocation services. Together for 25 years, the Evolve IP's management team has successfully brought advanced technologies to the market, and very customer-focused companies as well. We're yearly winners of multiple awards, which consist of the best of products. Product of the year for unified communications, interaction solutions, CRN, as well as individual accolades, Future 50 CEOs, as well as product and companies of the year. Also a member of the Inc. 500, fastest growing privately held cloud services provider. So a lot of success with customers throughout the nation. So this is our heat map. We're actually a little north of 800 customers and 50,000 end users that rely daily on all different types of services that we provide. 5 data centers located across the country, 1 in Philadelphia, 1 outside of Philadelphia in Wayne, 2 in Cleveland, and 1 in Las Vegas, as well as a lot of trusted partners that we use in the industry. So on the compute side, we have VMware, Cisco, EMC, also known as V+C+E. We use BroadSoft as our hosted PBX and call center features and functionalities, as well as Dell, IBM, and Polycom. Polycom on the handsets, Dell for servers, as well as end user computing, and IBM Tivoli Suite for monitoring and services. We have a track record for some rock-solid security. So the company is SSAE 16 and SOC 2 and 3 certified. So if you're familiar with the legacy SAS 70, this is the new certification out. So Evolve IP and all of its data centers, as well as our service organization, our processes, and procedures that pertain to security, availability, integrity, confidentiality are all certified and are governed by our SOC certification. We are PCI ASV approved scanning vendor, so we have the ability to do scan testing for PCI DSS requirements or just for general compliance. We are also a CSA Alliance Security Registry. That actually has been completed, and that allows companies that have different types of compliance requirements to look up individual requirements within a matrix to see what sections of our processes are mapped to a certain compliance requirement. At the bottom, we have multiple CISSPs on staff. I am actually one of them. So that is something that we take very near and dear. So as head of engineering and an executive within the company, as well as many other people in the organization, CISSP is very important to us from a services and security standpoint to make sure we have awareness and architecture with security built in mind from day one. So let's jump into the topic of the webinar now that you have a background of Evolve IP and where we are. So what is projected path total cost of ownership, and what does it mean to your business, and how can you use, what tools are out there to help you effectively manage the decision in front of you of, do I continue to build on-premise solutions? Do I continue to manage them myself, or do I look to a trusted partner to outsource it? And how do I quantify the difference between the two? So obviously when dealing with the cloud, the easiest part is obviously understanding what your spend is, because the entire monetary justification behind cloud is that you have a fixed monthly spend. You're buying a certain amount of services, resources, processes that are generally fixed in nature and are quantifiable. So you're going to buy 5 widgets and you're going to get them for X dollars a month. And if you hire a new employee, it's going to go to 6 widgets. So, down to the point of you have an accurate way to justify cost. It gives you that ability, but obviously for a premise-based solution where there are more variables involved, it's a little more difficult, and that's what we're going to spend a lot of time today going on. So what is total cost of ownership? TCO is used to calculate the total cost of purchasing and operating a technology product or service over its useful life. It is the way to construct an evaluation of technology costs that may not be reflected or be apparent in the upfront pricing. I think one of the hardest parts of dealing with executive decision makers is they will take for granted all of the things that we're going to go over today other than sort of what I'll call the big decision. So I have the choice to go out and spend Y dollars for a brand new server, or I can spend X dollars a month. And it's really how do you translate, yes, they only know about that Y dollars up front, but it's all the other things that you need behind it. So whether it's staff, power, all the things that we're going to get into today, those things are necessarily taken for granted because they're already in place today, and the only decision in front of you is you need to sign a purchase order for Y dollars to buy a new piece of equipment. So those are some of the things that we're going to uncover and look at today and help you understand. And then although many factor TCO into the purchasing equation, they often underestimate the hidden costs of a technology solution. Again, that's really what we're going to go over today. An IT or financial decision maker, unfortunately you have to have a little bit of a crystal ball to predict the future for an alternative to a cloud-based solution, because there's a lot of things that can come into play, whether it's issues within your data center. Hey, the roof just fell in and water's now in my server room, and now I need to deal with that and all the costs with cleaning that up, and sort of all of the issues that may go around operating your premise-based or alternative-based solution. And as part of the TCO, that is probably one of the hardest things to predict is, there's obviously useful life calculations like, hey, a server that I purchase is going to be able to be used for 3 to 5 years. But what happens on the 4th year or the 5th year? Am I going to need to replace a hard drive? Am I going to need to do other things, upgrades, and some of the things that we need to be aware of. So projected path TCO provides the process and mechanics to accurately predict the cost of purchasing and, more importantly, operating the technology on site and converting to a monthly spend, right? Because the purchasing part's the easy part, right? You can go out to any hardware vendor and say, hey, I need this big of a server, and here's your price. It's really about operating, maintaining it, and what all of the ancillary costs are beyond that purchase that we want to help you identify and predict. And obviously, when we talk about solutions, like I said, here's rough, an example of, okay, it may be, $6,135 for a premise-based solution versus, $5,893 for a cloud-based solution. That's really what you want to get down to is over the useful life, a cloud proposal for in this example is $58.93, and if we take the useful life of those servers with the TCO, you're going to come up with some monthly number that we're going to compare it to. And that's the entire point of the exercise. So how do you successfully position the TCO within your organization? Here's a couple of questions to help ask yourself and the group that will be performing, and also the group you're delivering the TCO. So does the cloud solution you're evaluating have the merit to invest time in conducting TCO analysis? And that's basically what I call the cocktail napkin test, right? So if you are looking at, I just need to buy one server to augment my very large data center as opposed to outsourcing everything to the cloud, it might be a more involved process for that decision. Meaning, if you have 20 servers in your data center and you just need to buy one more to do an application, that might not be the best time to say, okay, should I go out to Dell and spend, I don't know, $5,000 for a server as opposed to some very large cloud proposal that will replace my other 19 servers, right? So you need to also understand the timing of when to use a TCO. So the TCO isn't what I'll call a point-in-time decision. It's obviously for an overall analysis of premise-based versus cloud. Obviously, are both technical and financial decision makers engaged in the process? Obviously, at the right time to get those people involved makes sense, and we'll show you when to do that. And does the cloud solution require TCO? So if it's a simple project, hey, a lot of customers will come to me, and start with a very easy product, something like a hosted exchange and email. Obviously, if it's a very straightforward proposal for a small company, say you're 25 users and it's X dollars a month, it really doesn't make sense to sit there and figure out how much a server is, how much exchange is, right? So there's some that I'll say the cocktail napkin works on the reverse side works is this is just too simple to do, and do we really need to go through it as opposed to outsourcing our entire IT closet, so to speak. Specifically, what am I comparing this against? What is my alternative projected path? So that goes back to my example of, do I have one server out of 20 that I'm replacing? Am I replacing my entire data center, or is there a status quo option, right? So is there a TCO where it basically says that you're going to compare premise-based versus cloud versus doing nothing at all, right? And that's the other thing to understand is where are my alternative projected paths that this analysis could take me down? And then at the same time, do you have the confidence that the outcome of this process will determine how you proceed? And that goes back to the status quo as well as the having the right individuals engaged in the process. Is you're obviously going to put a great amount of effort and time into the TCO analysis. Is the decision going to be there based on what you find? So if one wins out over the other, does that mean that that decision will be made to continue doing it on site or doing it in the cloud, or is the decision looming that it's going to be what I'll call analysis paralysis, right, where you're so locked into determining what you want to do that status quo is going to win out because you can't move forward. At the same time is from a needs analysis, is that what's going to fill your requirements, and is it going to be timely for you? And at the same time, from both a technical and financial decision maker, all up and down the organization to the end users, are you in love with the solution? Does it help solve your business challenges, right? Or does it pose more challenges for you? So those are obviously the questions you need to be aware of as we continue to look through here. So obviously engaging your vendor in the TCO is very fruitful, and posing a lot of these questions and scenarios in with them will help you to fill in some of the blanks, I'll call it. So question and answer session with the technical and financial team, covering all the primary IT expense areas. So these are a lot of the costs that are associated with running infrastructure on site. So what's your data center costing. Obviously, you buy servers, you got to put software on it. So what does that software licensing look on? And most importantly, with software licensing, one thing that people miss out on is either software assurance or maintenance, right? So a lot of companies are comfortable with purchasing software but not necessarily purchasing maintenance on it because either they don't feel that they're going to have issues with it, or if they do have issues with it, they're going to pay they're going to pay for one-time support. So that's another thing to keep on. And as upgrades come out, are you charged for upgrades? If you don't have maintenance, are upgrades included? Obviously, power, environmental. We'll get into some of the specifics in the later slide. Maintenance. What preventative maintenance are you doing? So it's recommended every 3 years to proactively, change out filters, fans, power supplies, things like that. Are you gonna do a preventative maintenance schedule, or are you just gonna get vendor-based maintenance and roll the dice, and whenever things break, then the vendor will be responsible for replacing it? So those are some of the things to keep in mind. Obviously, support and training. If you're the primary IT person, if you're out for the day, who's your backup, right? If you're out for, God forbid, for extended period of time for health reasons, who's your backup, right? Who can help you? I hate to use the proverbial, if you get hit by a bus, I don't wish that on anyone. But the point is if you're not there to help support your business, right, who else is going to be there to support them? Who else are you going to invest training in? Obviously, disaster recovery, and this is something to think about is if you have one IT closet or one data center, if that data center becomes unavailable for a multitude of reasons, whether it's force majeure, act of God, a meteor hits a data center, and all your data is lost. What are your DR plans? And obviously intangibles that come up with operating your solution. And these are our 7 vaults of the cloud TCO. So what must you have to begin this process? I would not ask vendors to make assumptions. You must use real data and enter it into your calculations, and you should get as specific as possible. So you will have a fixed cost, as I mentioned earlier with the cloud proposal. You will have a widget cost, and you will understand what your per widget cost is, and that's a very fixed cost over the life of the contract, and that can even go down to an employee or associate fee. So as you know, if you're going to add 10 employees in 2015, you know what your costs are. You need to be that specific on the premise-based solution. So, how much is a server going to be? How much is more RAM going to be? If you need more disk space, right? How much does each user take? Obviously, this is a very involved process, and most of the even with all the data, working through the spreadsheet and making sure you have everything in a proper place is about a 90-minute exercise. And honestly, sometimes it's even longer based on all the inputs that you have as well as all the technologies that you may be evaluating. And then obviously be honest about all the expenses. The end results will be more accurate. Don't take a lot of your expenses for granted. There are some things that are standard plugs, whether it's price for power or things like that. And then there's other plugs that you're going to have to be pretty forthright about when estimating. And the point there is to be honest, because the hard part is I've seen many customers that'll go through this process, and for other reasons a premise-based solution might make more sense. And 6 months into the process, we've seen that TCO fall on its face because something unexpected had come up that they underestimated how much it would be for them. And then that's very hard to be in a TCO process that you're operating where 6 months into it your assumptions are wrong. And that's another part that we don't like seeing. And then obviously know the target number up front. It's not a realistic expectation to say, hey, we need to save 50% in order for this TCO, to work out to look at cloud. But at the same time, there are minor exceptions, right? Depending upon, how much it costs for you to support your infrastructure, there might be savings there, but obviously this is, wanted to keep it to a realistic exercise of providing, the cost benefit between cloud and premise-based. Um, so this is a trick slide. So when considering any new financial undertaking, you need to conduct a comparison between what you're already spending and what you will spend. And when you're considering any new financial undertaking, you need to conduct a comparison between what you're already spending and what you will spend. In most financial comparisons, you can look at previous patterns to predict future costs or options. Obviously, that's repeated. The point there is there's patterns over what happens with technology. Obviously, from a predictability standpoint, you don't know when a server is going to die, but over some point in time, there's a mean time between failure and other things. That's a simple example of patterns that'll happen over time. So, and it may be specific to your industry. We have certain industries that that prefer to refresh of technology more frequently. So whether that's a yearly cycle or a 2-year cycle, most customers or prospects will see a 3 to 5 year cycle for refreshing it. Now that could hold true for both cloud or premise-based. That's one of the things to keep in mind. But obviously, as you continue to go through this, you'll start to notice patterns as you quantify the differences between the technologies. So again, these are all the 7 areas that we talked about earlier in the slide. And as you continue to unlock these vaults, as we call them, that is where you will find your accurate total cost of ownership. And we're going to walk through specific examples of the vaults. So obviously, whether it's just an IT closet that you operate or physical data center, there's obviously a lot of things that go into place. How much do I'm buying a server, but I'm out of rack space. Great, now I need a rack. Okay, I need a rack now. I need cabling now. I need a switch. Right. So keep those things in mind as you go through it. And at the same time, don't shortchange yourself. Right. So if you're expecting to buy servers that are 3 years old to support your business needs today, that has to be comparable to the cloud equipment that you're buying, right? So a lot of the cloud resources today, or today generation or next generation based equipment. So whether it's memory speed, disk speed, CPU speed, things like that, need to make sure that it's comparable and that you're not comparing it to, okay, we're getting some servers off lease and we're going to get a great deal on them, right? Because that's obviously not an unfair comparison. Software licensing. So I touched on this a little bit earlier and alluded to this, that obviously there's a lot of software involved in your environment. So whether it's just the base server OS licensing, your app licensing, your databases, and obviously backup, and everything that you'll need. Obviously not only the software, but you have to look at the maintenance too of that, as well as desktop operating systems, virtual desktop licensing, and all the things that you need on your desktops to stay current. But remember, for accurate TCO comparison, you must project your path on-premise with similar technology you will receive from a service provider. So if you continue to reuse equipment, obviously that changes the TCO. Number 3 is power environmental. Just a few servers running 24 hours a day over 1 month can add up to a couple $100 per server, especially when you factor in the network switches, the UPS, all the things that you need, as well as cooling and HVAC on average can account to 50% of the power costs for that. And then at the same time, how resilient is your power and environmentals, right? Do you have a diesel powered generator? You can bet your cloud provider does. And obviously, as we operate, tier 3 and tier 4 data centers, where you have fully redundant UPS power and cooling. So TCO vault number 4, hardware maintenance and software assurance. So this comes back into the maintenance and upkeep assessment. So obviously you're going to have upgrades as well as things breaking, right? Are you going to take maintenance out on them, or are you going to roll the dice and say, all right, I'm going to keep a stock of a couple of hard drives in place, or I'm just going to pay the one-time fee when I have to upgrade to the next version, and make sure that that fee is projected in your TCO in the later years. Obviously cloud solutions bundle support on their services, and we obviously protect you from obsolete technology. So from a service delivery perspective, what we provide is fixed and accountable from a technology standpoint. And from a maintenance perspective, it's all handled behind the scenes. As we engage with our vendors to make sure that equipment is maintained. So support personnel and training. Part of the cloud's greatest impact is enabling valuable IT resources to get out of doing the tedious and useless tasks that drain their time. I call this the blinky light syndrome. IT is, in my mind, meant for providing valuable solutions to your company. And nobody knows your company's IT better than you. And if I can help companies refocus those resources to working with internal and external associates to increase the IT awareness, I love to alleviate customers and prospects of that blinky light syndrome. And that's one of the things that you have to keep in mind in the TCO is as you look at a premise-based solution, you're going to have multiple personnel that are going to have to be trained and know, how to maintain that on site, as well as find the time to continue to be an IT resource for your company. And then at the same time, do you employ a 24/7 support staff? Vault number 6, disaster recovery and continuity. I alluded to the fact that if you have problems with your data center today, what's your DR solution? And those are things that need to be calculated in both a premise-based solution and a cloud-based solution. From a budgeting perspective, when you calculate your vault number 1, which is your physical data center and hardware, you can look around a 50 to 70% of that number can be used as a budgetary requirement for disaster recovery and continuity, depending upon how you're doing it with a second site, or if you're doing primary site with a off-site backup, as well as other things. The biggest cost there is not necessarily doing the service, but in when you push the button or when you have to declare emergency, what costs are involved there. Obviously the tape backup with an off-site carrier is very cost effective, but when was the last time you ever tried to recover it? That's the hard part. Is with an on-site solution, how much time, value, and money is it with both testing that solution as well as making sure it's practical. Can I restore my business? Obviously, the intangibles. These are a lot of questions and paradigms that we can't quantify as an industry to say, what's an hour downtime cost for your business, right? There are some businesses that are very mobile and very remote, where an hour of downtime is not that big of a deal. They might not be IT dependent, and they can do things remotely for an hour, make phone calls, or do other lines of business. Where there's companies that are extremely dependent upon IT. If they're down for an hour, it might be a huge loss of business as well as a reputation problem for them. And all the things of what's the value of lost customer transaction? If your website's not up, is that a primary driver for your business? If your email is not up, are you going to lose the opportunity to bid on a business? If you can't send that proposal out, how much is that going to cost your business? And how do you measure the value of availability? And that's one of the things that we need to quantify as an intangible. And are you certain that premise technology will cover your need for the next 5 years? And this goes back to, have you ever guessed wrong? So that prospect that 6 months into it had a little bump in the road. How does that work out? So we're going to get into a quick example of using a calculator. I know we're trying to keep to the time frame here because I want to open up to questions at the end. So there's some contact information, and it'll also be included in the link, so you can get a copy of the TCO calculator. So this is for premise-based VDI technology, and this is an example of a TCO for over 60 months. And there's obviously a lot of inputs, whether it comes down to servers, how much does a new PC cost, how much does a new thin client cost, and where applicable, we've put in some plugs here, but at the same time, there's comments in here. So as you can see, it's an Excel spreadsheet, and there's a nice little red notation there for comments and other things. But this was a specific example that we did where we looked at a premise-based solutions on a yearly and a 5-year, as well as a premise-based solution monthly cost. So this 5-year projected path TCO for a premise-based VDI technology, 60-year of a little over $1 million, which came down to a monthly price of $17,524. So before you get started with the calculator, remember the calculator projects premise technology. You will then compare the results against a cloud-based monthly solution. And have you conducted the TCO interview with both your vendors and your internal constituents, and do you have the information needed? Obviously, understand the upfront that the calculator will only get you about 70% accurate for the actual what I'll call compute and other expenses. The 30% is a lot of the sort of nebulous areas that we talk about, the DR continuity. What is your DR path? How are you going to pay per incident? Is it just going to be off-site carrier, and then you're going to hope and pray that you can find some extra hardware to restore your business to? Obviously the cost of downtime, the risk of loss. If I can't send out this email, are we going to lose business? Obviously your inferior technology choices and changes that you're going to need to make as you make those changes. Obviously there are financial implications of CapEx versus OpEx. So depending upon how your company is structured, they may look at CapEx more favorably versus operating expenditures, or vice versa. And then opportunities. Not only will it be increased sales and productivity, mobility, with different options, but I also look at lost opportunities. It goes back to, can we refocus the IT resources to help internally and externally to provide your business with more value other than, making sure lights are blinking in the other room. So we have a case study of using the TCO. So again, this is, we'll give you some contact info as well as it'll be mailed out with the link. So this is something that we will provide to give you guys an example. This specifically was a 110-person property management company with 5 locations nationwide, and they needed to refresh hardware, add DR, and obviously upgrade their accounting system. And their question was premise or cloud. We went through that entire analysis with them, and can provide that as a case study example. So again, this is the email address if you would like the TCO analysis as well as the case study. Please send an email to tco@evolveip.net, and you can also download the projected path TCO calculator at www.evolveip.net/TCO. Thank you again, and I'm going to open up the floor to any questions. Please hold for 1 second. Does anyone have any questions at this time? Okay, with that, then we are going to wrap up the webinar. Again, if you do have any other questions or if you think of anything as you're going through it, please feel free to email that address, and we will gladly get back to you. Thank you again for your time, and much appreciated.